Hello and welcome to this video. We're going to be painting this apple with some lovely leaves on it, which, believe it or not, are not apple leaves. And so this painting I've been asked to paint along with some others, and I've been asked to paint on this portrait format. The lady who's asked me to do this painting wanted an apple, but she wanted it on portrait. So this subject has presented a couple of problems. Let's see if I can find my way around these cameras and stools and things. Right, and one of the problems is that it doesn't lend itself to a tall format. I've had to adapt things a little bit. That's one of the problems, that it doesn't lend itself to this tall format. The second problem is that getting a picture of an apple with leaves on at this time of year, or getting an apple with leaves this time of year, has proved to be quite difficult because there aren't many of them about. Most of the leaves have now fallen off, and the apples are off the trees, and we've got plenty of apple trees in our garden, and I normally just pinch one when I want to do a painting of an apple. Just take one and I've got the leaves and everything. But now, this time of year, as I say, getting an apple with leaves on is tricky. So what I've had to do is, and you might be able to see it in the photo, is blue tack some leaves on. So those leaves aren't actually growing on the apple, they've been blue tacked on, and that's allowed me to then create this tall sort of composition, which is quite handy, because then I can fill the portrait of the image, make the image portrait rather. Sorry, I'm trying to concentrate and talk. I can't multitask very well. So yeah, that's one of the problems I've faced setting this up. And the second problem was that the leaves, they're not apple leaves. They're actually leaves off a bramble, but they look similar to apple leaves. So if any kind of apple experts see this painting, they'll pull it apart and say it's incorrect. But anyway, I'm more interested in the sort of the compositional aspects of it. Now I am going to tweak the composition slightly, in that the leaves are very vertical. You can see on the photograph that the top leaf is very vertical, and it looks like a flag sticking up off the top of the image, and I don't like that very much. So I am going to modify. When I do the drawing, I'm going to change it slightly. In fact, I'll do that leaf now. So I want it more of a diagonal coming this way. So let's just get that. So I'm going to have the leaf something round about there on a diagonal. So yeah, that's how I came about doing this. And I want to emphasize the shadows, and again, as always, I'm going to think a lot about edges and disappearing edges and that type of thing. The other thing I want to do in this video, and I did mention it in the previous video that I did, I want to talk about errors that I see with people who are new to painting. So I teach a painting class, and I've been running workshops and things like that for the past few years, and in all that time I continually see this kind of same mistakes cropping up over and over again. So not that I'm any expert in this, but just things that I think I can share from my experiences of teaching that might help you with your own work. I mean, they've helped me, in all honesty. Seeing people making these mistakes has made me reflect on what I do myself, and has helped me to think about my own work and the way I approach making paintings. So I just thought I'd share that with you. And I did the other night put together a list of sort of the top 10 things that I see people doing. But actually, I then came to try and put them in kind of order of the most common offenders and things like that. And I actually couldn't do it. I struggled to do it. So I'm just going to talk about, as I go through this painting, I'm going to talk about the things that are listed. And I've got them written down here at the side so I don't forget any of them. As I say, I'm just trying to concentrate at the minute on getting the drawing right. Now, I think, looking at this now, I'm wondering whether I've gone too far over with this apple. I think I might move that a little bit. Just because the leaf at the side, this leaf, I want it to have more of a diagonal. If I have it too much of a diagonal, it's going to disappear off the side of there. So I think what I'm going to do is move the apple over a little bit. That's the great thing with things like, you know, these pieces of fruit, and it's not like painting a bowl or a teapot or something where you know, you've got to get it absolutely spot on. You can kind of move this around a little bit. So I'm going to have the apple sort of here, I think, almost bang in the middle. And that's why I do want this leaf to kind of offset it a little bit. Yeah, that's probably better. I can get that leaf in there now. I'm not sort of tying myself really religiously to this reference. I mean, I'm painting from life, but you've got the reference photo, so I'm not absolutely copying precisely. As you can see, I'm adapting it for the sake of the painting. I think that's quite important. I mean, that isn't even on my list of things that I see people doing, but it could be. You know, people, particularly if you're copying from a photograph, copying a painting from a photograph, a lot of the time I'll see people absolutely religiously copying what they see, or trying to at least, and forgetting that what we're trying to do is create a painting that's it's got an appeal in its own right. And it's a standalone, you know, it's a standalone object, the painting is. That's got to go a little bit higher. There. So yeah, seeing the painting's the priority, not accurately copying everything that you see in the photograph. That's not your priority. Your priority is to make an attractive painting. So if you have to move things, so be it. You know, that's what you've got to do to make the painting work. And that's one of the reasons why I think spending some time on the setup is really important, because if you have a successful still life setup, it makes the job of painting so much easier. Actually, that's further over now. I'm looking at this. That bit there's further over. So let me just, that's quite a narrow gap there. Yeah. So I was saying, just spend a little bit of time thinking about your setup, getting the composition correct or interesting. Spend a lot of time on the lighting. Lighting can make all the difference. I have got a video on Patreon on setting up a still life and lighting it, but it's probably something I will do again, because it, as I say, it makes such a difference to the success of the painting. The lighting does. I mean, one of the things I want to improve myself in my own work this year is composition. I don't think it's something I'm very good at, and it's something I want to improve on. I mean, I'm getting there, I think, but they're very. I prefer very simple compositions. I don't want anything too overly fancy or complicated. Right now, there's a dark shadow down here. So it's very dark over this side of the image. All this is in shadow, so I'll keep that dark there. Now the apple, the shadow on the apple's got kind of two tones on it. We've got the red and the yellow. And when you have something like that, you still got to consider where the shadow is. So the red's obviously much darker than the yellow. And if you're not careful, that can end up looking like a shadow. But actually, when I squint at this, I can see that the shadow's down here. Even though the division between the red and the yellow is here, the actual shadow, the shadow side, is over here. And then there's a very dark shadow at the bottom. So yeah, spend a lot of time getting the light in and the composition, sort all of that out, and that's going to really help when it comes to having a successful painting. If you're copying from a photograph, make sure you get a decent quality photograph. I mean, the one that I put on there has just been taken with my phone. But if you can and you've got a good camera, then the best photo you can, that will really help. Everything to help you make a convincing painting. I just hope these leaves don't move. I can actually see them moving. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to mix up, there's a kind of a light grey tan type colour, ochre colour in the background. I'm going to emphasise the grey in it. It's a piece of wood. And I'm going to try and make it, I think, fairly textural. And then we've got the dark values, which are going to be quite flat. I'll probably add the texture at the end of the painting, but I do want to get that value marked in first of all. It's going to be done quite loosely. Take a big lump of white. And so let's take that lump of white, start with the white. And I'm going to get some yellow ochre in there. Just to give us that yellowy background, and I'll probably add some grey. And like I say, at the end I'm going to add some texture to it. So it's very light, I don't want it to get too dark. And that's probably too dark and too grey. A bit of cobalt blue might help. I still think that might be too. Actually, when I'm looking at it now and I'm flicking my eyes backwards and forwards, I can see violet in it. So rather than trying to mix about, I'm just going to use, I've got some deep purple, dioxazine purple. I'm going to use a touch of that just to, it's very strong tinting colour that is. I only need a tiny bit. And that will really cool this down. That's actually not too bad. So I'm going to go with that for my light. So add a touch more blue to it. And then the shadows, I'm going to use some raw umber. In fact, I'm just thinking I might need to mix more of this. Just because I always like to have plenty of the background colour available. Get some more black in there. So one of the things that I had on my list that I thought I'd talk about, and I'll try and talk about these things as they crop up in my own painting, was the fact that what I see students or people I'm teaching so often painting with the paint too thick. It's almost neat out of the tube. And that rule of fat over lean, where you have very thin paint to start with, thin layers, just helps you avoid getting in a mess of creating mud. It really does. So keep the first few paint layers very thin, and you'll have you'll see the brush marks and you'll see the colour of the panel showing through, especially if you're using transparent colours. But all of that, all of those marks contribute to the finished image, and they can really help. Yeah, I didn't mix enough again. Anyway, let's go with that. Now the shadow side is a little bit warmer, so I'm going to use some burnt umber and raw umber to create the shadow colour. Burnt umber is quite warm, it's like an orangey brown, and it's quite dark, so a bit of both of those. Touch of black in there. I want that quite warm, so I'm going to put some transparent red oxide into it as well, if I can find it. There we go. This is a dark colour, but with plenty of chroma in it, so when you, as I said in the previous video, when you're trying to judge colours in very dark areas and very light areas, it's quite tricky, but I can see that there's some chroma in that area. Too dark? No, I think it needs to be warmer, definitely. There. Okay, it's not the end of the world if they aren't correct, because I'm going to, as I say, I'm going to tweak all of that as I go. Okay, now I'm going to use a scruffy brush and just kind of map that in. Where is it? So coming back to the point I was making about fat over lean. So now I'm got a little pot of solvent, some pure turpentine in it. I literally dip the tip of the brush into that, and as you can see, when it goes on, you get quite a lot of texture in terms of the brush marks, and you know, you can see some of the panel colour showing through, but actually that can add to the painting. So the leaf. So yeah, working in thin layers for as long as you can, really. There isn't kind of a set point when you suddenly think, all right, I've done all the thin layers, now let's go to the fat layers. It's as it's needed. So when I'm really happy with the painting and I'm getting towards the end of it, and I'm kind of convinced that all the drawing's right and the value's right and all of that, then I will commit to putting on much bolder marks with thicker paint. But in the first instance, keep it nice and thin. That, I think, can go on more of a diagonal down here. I can sort that out when I get to it. I'm wondering if that leaf's probably a bit too big. One of the other things that came up on my list, and I have mentioned this in other videos, is the fact that when I see people painting, beginners painting, one thing that is common is that they see this white panel, this board or paper or whatever they're going to paint on, and they think that they're going to have to produce a finished painting, something fabulous, which they may well do, and there's nothing wrong with having that objective in mind. But then what happens as they're painting and it doesn't appear quickly, that fabulous painting doesn't start to appear as quickly as they wanted, they get demoralized and they think, oh, this is rubbish, I'm no good at this, I can't do this. I've heard that so many times. I can't do this. But they're expecting results too quickly. Painting, in my opinion, is a process of just continual refinement. You start off with the broad areas, and you know, it's not going to be perfect, and gradually you begin to refine things, and you get to something like eventually. Now that shadow, see, I might have that shadow in the wrong area. That shadow comes down here, and then we get into the shadows, the dark shadows, I mean. Okay, so yeah, expecting results too quickly is really common. And people give up, as I say, people do give up. That's probably better with more blue in it. I can get a bit more blue in that. So I'm using a touch of ultramarine. It gets browner as it comes down here, so so yeah, don't expect results straight away. I mean, I've said it before, you know, you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs, so it's not going to be perfect in the first few hours. Even it takes time. I mean, if you get to a point where you painted, repainted, corrected, and then there's something clearly wrong somewhere, and then you've got to the challenge then is identifying what it is that's going wrong. It could be that the setup isn't very interesting. It could be that the lighting on your setup isn't very interesting, and then you kind of you're battling against that to try and improve it. And if the actual setup isn't very good, no amount of battling is going to suddenly make, you know, you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear sort of thing. So that's why it's important in that at the start to get something that's interesting to look at, and think in terms when you're setting up the still life. Think in terms of a painting. It's got, imagine it. That's why a viewfinder is great. So I use a viewfinder and I hold it up in front of the subject, and that will, and then you can see it almost like a painting. Does that look good? Would that look good as a painting? Would I hang that on my wall, that image? Right, so these shadows, they're all quite soft and they disappear. Okay. So it could be, yeah, it could be the setup that's wrong. And as I say, you're on a loser straight away. You just, you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, as I say. If the setup's okay, then it comes down to, usually it's one of three things. Is your drawing okay? Are the proportions of the image accurate? The drawing's the number one thing. If the drawing isn't accurate, then the painting's going to look awkward. If the drawing's okay, and you could check whether the drawing's okay by things like flipping the image upside down, looking at it through a mirror. That's a good one. That will help you to see it from a different sort of point of view. Get a piece of paper and hide part of the image, so you could hide the bottom half. And what does the top half look like? Does that look okay? Flip around, look at the bottom half of the image. Does the bottom half look okay? Just to help you identify where it's going wrong. So sort of partition your picture so you can see which bits look correct and which bits don't. Once you've sorted the drawing out, or if the drawing's okay and it's still not working, it's probably down to your values then. Are your shadows dark enough? That's one that's common, making the shadows too light. Are the shadows dark enough? Are the values in the subject dark enough or light enough? Have you got the values correct? And the way to check is to squint really hard at the subject. Get rid of the detail that you've got in there, because detail can confuse values. Squint really hard at the image, or take a photo of it and blur it out. and then check the values. And the third thing is, and I'm going to come to that later on, the third thing is the colour. Now I'm just looking at these shadows here. So this shadow here on the apple is the same value as that, pretty much, but it's a purpley red. So I'm going to try and get that done next. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just clean up a bit. I'll stop the video, I'll clean up a bit, and then I'll come back to mixing that red. Okay, so I'm going to try and mix this dark shadow colour. And although I'm going to start with the red, so it's a crimson alizarin, but I want the shadow to be even darker than that and cooler. It's a little bit, it's got some violet in it. Might even add a touch of black to it. Let's see how I go with that. That might be too dark. I don't know. I'm going to add even more blue to it just to cool it down. So that's cobalt blue. And there is a cool shadow in there as well. So let's put that on. I'm going to use a big flat brush at this point now. Well, actually, that's not too bad. It might even have to go darker. There's definitely some blue at the top here. That's ultramarine I've just put in. And then there's a slight reflected light, and there's a kind of a core shadow that comes down here. And then we've got some reflected light from the surface, which makes it a little bit warmer. I'm just going to stop the video for a second because I'm running out of oil. So yeah, I cleaned the brush using safflower oil. I have got some Gamsol, but I dip the brush into safflower oil and then wipe it off. I'm getting really low on it, and I don't like using Gamsol because it gives me headaches. Right, so now I need to warm that colour up a touch. So I'm going to add some cadmium red into it, and some, to keep it dark but high chroma, a little bit of the brown, the burnt umber and transparent red oxide. Darken it with a touch of that black. I've got to be careful the black doesn't make it too cool. Still, I need to go warmer still. What I could do is add a touch of ochre or this Terra Rosa to it. That might help. Being quite cautious with this colour because I'm conscious I don't want to lose the value. It's definitely bluer up here and more red, warmer at the bottom. I see that's too high chroma. What was I talking about before? I switched it off. It was to do with oh yeah, correcting your mistakes, wasn't it? Yeah, and people expecting results too early on. It's a touch of Scarlet Lake I've just added there, just for this bottom part. That will make it even warmer still. Yeah, so people do want to see, something very finished too early on. Or they expect to see something finished very early on in the process, and it just, you have to work towards that. It doesn't come straight away. So now I need to warm up slightly. So I'm going to just clean this bulk of this paint off. add some Scarlet Lake to this. This is a very orangey red. Quite keep it thin, so some turpentine in there, and you'll probably see the difference as soon as I put this on. See how much brighter that is. I could probably add some crimson to that to keep it. I don't want to get too high in value. That Scarlet Lake's a really, really nice colour. We're actually getting a bit pinker down there now. So Scarlet Lake, crimson alizarin, and a touch of white. I could probably get even pinker than that. There, something like that. It's cadmium red. Cadmium red with a touch of crimson in it. That gives a really intense red. That's probably better for here. And a shadow down here. And then we're getting really into pinks, and then we begin to move towards the yellows and the oranges. There's just a dark shadow up here. I've got to get in. Definitely pink here. I'm going to add a touch of cadmium yellow to that pink. Very thin. I don't know if you could see on the panel how thin the paint is that I'm using. There is a highlight obviously on this side. Around here. Getting very light over this side now. So I'm trying to see the apple in terms of patches of colour. And then obviously I can do any kind of blending later on, but I just want to get those subtle changes in place. That's actually more of that colour there. So I've got some lemon yellow now that I'm lightening that kind of peachy type colour that I got earlier. That's definitely lighter there. Keeping it thin. If it gets, I'm conscious, I'm actually getting too dark down this side, so I'm going to take some of that paint off down there. That's better. It's very light down that side and up here. And then at the top here, it's really light. I might even change the brush for that. Still using a big brush, same size, flat, but a clean one. And I'm going to use some of this. This is a Michael Harding lemon yellow. It's very, very light. And just so it's not being polluted, that's why I've got a clean brush. Still using the solvent. It is slightly thicker, this blob of paint that I'm using, even though I've got the solvent on there. It's slightly thicker. That goes across there. Now I can merge some of this. Okay, that'll be okay for the moment. Now I'm going to move on to the leaves. So I'm just clean this up and I'll begin to work on the leaves. No, happy with that. Okay. So I'm going to mix the local colour of the leaves to start with, which is quite a dark yellowy green. So I've got some cadmium green and a little bit of viridian. And I'm going to take out some of the chroma by adding in some raw umber to that. So that makes it, moves it more towards kind of an olivey green. That's still too light in value, so I'm going to add more raw umber into it. Raw umber is basically a dark yellow, so obviously green's made of yellow and blue. So I can darken it with the raw umber. If I was to darken it, which is a dark yellow, as I say, if I was to darken it with the blue, or essentially a black, I could darken it with black, because black's a dark blue. Black is essentially a dark blue anyway. That's not too bad. Now that's quite, I need to add a touch of, I'm adding a little tiny speck of phthalo green to up the chroma, even though keep the value the same. If I was to add the black to this, it would cool that green down too much. That's not too bad for the green in the leaf there. Could probably go even higher chroma. Okay, so I'm going to use that as the green of the leaf, the local colour, and that leaf's the same. And then I need to mix up a grey for the back side of the leaves. I am now adding black for the very dark shadows in the leaf. Okay. And I'm going to use a slightly smaller brush for this. Not massively smaller, just sort of a 1/2 inch flat. And again, I'm going to try and put patches of colour on. So I'm going to start with the main local colour on the leaves. So coming back to the mistakes I see, yeah, one of them, and it's probably relevant to talk about it now, is the fact, a common mistake I see is people using too high a chroma with the paints. So there's, although I'm painting high chroma now, there aren't many greys in their paintings, and in actual fact, most of the world, when we look around, the colours are pretty sort of neutral. You know, it's not like a sort of a primary school where everything's in primary colours. It's most of the things that you look at are made up of greys, and then you get the odd splash of really intense colour. But that's what we see a lot of the time. We kind of catch, that's what catches our eyes. like this apple, the red's what catches your eyes, not all these sort of muted tones underneath. And I often see people painting using really, that sort of idea that the sky is always blue and the grass is always green. So people, when they're painting, they'll just get the green tube of paint out and paint the grass green. And actually, when you really look and begin to see the colour of grass, you realise, it's made up of blues, it's made up of greys, it's made up of ochre type colours. It's not as simplistic as that it's just grass is green. And that's a common mistake. People sort of going straight from the tube of paint, I'm going to paint some grass, I'll get the green paint out. And that, to get over that, you need to really, really look carefully and be very critical, self-critical about the paints that you're using, and limit the high chroma colours, because they are real attention grabbers. Those bright colours are real attention grabbers. And if you can limit their use, they have more impact. Less is more. So limit the amount that you use them. Right now here, the top of this leaf is really dark against the background. So I'm probably going to have to lighten the background as well, but I'm going to put that in very dark at the moment. Could probably go even darker. I'm just touch of black in there because that bit there is really dark. And down this side of the leaf is dark. And down this side of the leaf is dark. All the way down to here. There's a dark shadow in there. So yeah, keep in mind the greys. They are what help the colours to really sing. If the entire painting is covered in high chroma, bright, sort of garish colours, it actually takes away from the colours that you want to stand out. Just think less is more. That's down the centre of there. There's a dark patch. The leaf's kind of got a little tear in it. So there's a dark patch there. Okay, and then we're into dark shadow areas. There's pure black here. That's almost pure black. That's black there that I've already put in. And then up in this leaf, it's very dark here. So colour, keep colour neutral for as long as you can, and then really be considered about where the high chroma colours are going to be. And the other thing is values. You can make sure your darks are dark enough. Okay, right, I'm going to leave that for the moment, and then I'm going to mix up the light values that we've got. Actually, that comes down here. This leaf is actually probably darker than I've got it, and there's actually a vein that runs down the centre of it, so I might just indicate that now. Down there. Okay, I'm just going to clean up. Get the greys mixed. So what else was on my list? Oh yeah, that was another one that's probably relevant now. Was when people start to paint, they're so used to, people obviously come from a background where we've drawn, and drawing involves obviously putting a line around, an outline around an object. And there's a really interesting book on oil painting by Harold Speed, where he tries to explain that, why we do that, why we put an outline around things, and why that kind of gives us a sense of some sort of sense of security. Actually, just let me get that in there. And what Harold Speed says is that when we are learning to perceive the world as children, we don't perceive the world through sight. We perceive the world through touch. And that's why children pick things up and they put it in the mouth and all that sort of thing. And they're perceiving the world through touch. And that's how you figure out whether something is hard or soft, rough or smooth. And then once you've learned that through touch, obviously you begin to recognize things, and that your sight is a secondary thing. So you'll see something and you will know through experience of touching it that it's going to be hard or soft or rough or smooth. Wow, that was quite lucky. That's almost spot on there. Maybe go a touch lighter. Anyway, when we start to draw as a child, it's very closely linked to that experience of touching objects. So what you do is you do an outline, because that's kind of that security of what things feel like, apparently. I mean, I'm not explaining it very well. I'll put a link to the book when I post this video. It's something about oil painting. I can't remember the exact title. It's by a guy called Harold Speed. It's an old book. It was written probably 100 years ago, but there's loads and loads of really good information in there. Right, that could probably go a touch lighter at the bottom as the leaf curls. I don't want to get too into specifics. So yeah, when we are learning to paint, we a lot often people want to put an outline in and then fill it in with, it's like colouring in. And when we look at objects in the real world, they don't have an outline around them. Not very often anyway. They're nearly always values butting up against other values. That's the reality. So when we start to paint, we want to move away from an outline and start to think in terms of shape, not line. And where one shape meets another shape. So now I'm looking at this leaf and I can see there's a shape here and there's a shape there, to make that kind of effect that the leaf is curling. You can't get that with line, really, not very effectively anyway. Same thing here. So there's a light shape down there on the side, and then there's a slightly darker shape where the leaf is curled. And I'm trying to just see the shapes to start with. I need to get that in. There's a light shape down here. Down the side of this leaf is a light shape. And there. So that was another thing that I thought was worth mentioning. Think in terms of shapes. When you're looking at a subject, see it as blocks of shape, and that's why squinting is really useful. I didn't get the shadow underneath there in, did I, when I was putting those shadows in? And the other thing that's kind of related to that is the use of the brush. Yeah, your brush isn't the same as a pencil, obviously, but you know, you can get different marks from a brush than you can a pencil. So, but a lot of people will use the paintbrush like it's a pencil, and they will be drawing with it, drawing lines with it, rather than allowing it to make the marks. Like all of these marks on here, brush marks, can be really handy. Where I want to get rid of these little sort of patches of white. I don't know why I left that there. There's not actually nothing there. Okay, right, next thing is going to be the surface and the shadow under the apple. So what I'm going to do, actually, I was thinking about this before when I was cleaning the palette. I'm probably, although I'm going to talk about these points in the video, and I'm conscious not everybody's going to probably watch the video all the way through to the end. Or you might kind of dab in and dib out. Yeah. dip in and out. So what I'm going to do is I'll write all of these points down and put it together in kind of an article, I think, and then post that onto Patreon. That's probably the best thing. Actually, all of this is much darker than I've got it because it helps to highlight the apple, that edge of the apple. That's better. That comes up more of an angle down there. And then that can be darker still down here, actually. That's got some ochre in it. Sorry, mumbling to myself. That is like an ochre. That's probably reflected off the apple at the side. Right, now the surface, which is like an ochre yellow. Just looking through my list of problems that people have. Outlining, yeah, outlining. If you get into that habit of drawing and colouring in, the problem is then it's really difficult to understand edges, and you'll have hard edges all the way around everything. So many people have these paintings and they complain because they say they're tight, the painting's tight, and every single edge in the painting is a hard edge. And that's because they probably started with a drawing in which they outlined everything. And you've got to try and get away from that because they can end up looking like a cartoon. You know, in cartoons when they have a line around the outside of everything. Right, I'm looking for my yellow ochre. If I don't find it within the next few seconds, I'm going to stop the video and root around for it. It's funny, I think this yellow ochre paint I've got, I think it hides. I never can find it. I think it kind of worms its way to the bottom of the pile and it's hiding from me. Because I can never find it. Maybe it's the colour. Maybe because it's such a neutral colour, you don't spot it. It's always the colours that I don't want that I spot. Right, so I think this surface is almost pure yellow ochre, actually. Anyway, as long as the value's right, that's the main thing. I get the value in, and then I can adjust it afterwards. There is a shadow in here. What else was on the list? Just let me have a quick look. I've written it all down. Think in terms of the subject. Oh right, yeah, that was the drawing and outlining. I've done that. Oh yeah, one thing I probably should have talked about more before when I was blocking in. When you're doing the early stages of the painting, try to think in terms of just very simple areas of light and shadow. And that's where squinting comes in. I don't know if I've probably already mentioned this, but really, really simplify things down into just light areas, shadow areas. Try not to think of the subject. It's just areas of light, areas of shadow. That's lighter there against the apple. And this shadow comes up that side. Okay, now the dark shadow area, I'm going to get some of the burnt umber. Burnt umber or umber. And that's the shadow of cast from the apple. Okay, right. What I'm going to do now is just soften everything and then leave it for half an hour to tack up a little bit, and then I'll come back and rework it all. So I'm going to use, as you've seen before, I'm going to use this Hake brush, 1 inch, and I'm just going to merge areas. So one of the most obvious areas I want to blend is this shadow here, where the apple disappears there. And I've got to obviously soften all of these shadows of the background. If I don't do this now, I mean, this paint will be dry, be virtually, I mean, touch dry anyway, easily within an hour. So if I don't do this now, I'm not going to move it. It's not moving after that. I mean, I can rework it afterwards and paint over, which I probably will do in some areas, but I want to get the general feel early on. Okay, like I said, the light area is going to be quite textured, so I'm not too fussed about that being blended. Where the surface meets the background, I want that to be quite soft. The edge of that shadow is going to be quite soft. In here, that edge is going to disappear. And having a look at that edge of that leaf is going to disappear. This edge is going to disappear. And the reason they're going to disappear is the values on the side of that leaf and the background are virtually the same. You know, even when I look at that, I can barely see a division between the two. All of these grey parts of the leaves are virtually the same as the background. And then finally, I just want to merge some of these, but I don't want to lose those patches of colour that I had right at the start. And that edge is going to stay quite hard. That edge is going to stay really soft. And then I can soften some of that there. Okay, how's that looking? Right, I'm going to leave that for, like I say, half an hour or so to tack up a little bit more, and then I'll come back and rework it. Okay, so I'm back. I've left this for half an hour or more, and I'm going to start working over it all again. I'm going to start the same process with the background, shadows, and then into the apple. Plenty of white to start with, because I want to put texture in the background. As I said, I don't necessarily want this to be a flat, smooth background. We'll see how that goes. I may end up eating my words. Okay, so while I had a break, I was thinking about this that I was talking about earlier, about the lessons that I could pass on. And I think one of the most important things that probably not mentioned is, and it's to do with one thing that's really going to help you to improve your painting, and that is about how you see the world, learning to see. I think learning to see the world objectively, with no kind of don't bring any of your own sort of previous knowledge of things, your subject I'm talking about, when you perceive the world and your subject, trying to not bring your preconceived ideas to that is one of the key things in improving your work, because it's very easy to begin to draw and paint what you think something looks like rather than what it actually looks like. And I'm probably not explaining that very well, but it's a bit like what I was saying earlier about, you know, we naturally just jump towards painting the grass green and the sky blue. But actually, when you look really closely, I did a painting when I was in France last summer, a landscape, plein air landscape painting. And I really, really looked at the sky to see if I could get an accurate colour. And it was green. It wasn't blue. It was where the sky's quite low, coming down towards the horizon, and it was actually green. So, you know, just paint what you see. So I painted the sky green, and it captured the atmosphere of that moment. But I would have never thought of doing that. Right, I'm just checking and getting this colour right. I want a variety of different colours to work on in this background, but I want to keep the value. So I'm holding this up against the subject, and I'm holding it up against the palette, the panel. We have got some warmer notes in there, as it were, some touches. Right, lots of different colours. Now I'm going to use a scruffy brush. Let me get a flat, sort of a scruffy half-inch scruffy brush. I'm using the paint fairly thick. I've got some linseed oil here at the side. So I'm going to use blobs of these different colours. Let's see what the main colour is. The main colour is like a violet-y kind of colour. Oh, there is a vertical there. Might need to get some more oil on the brush to get it to flow better. Yeah, I think that can be quite light on here. Certain edges are going to stand out more than others. So I'm thinking about that now. Yeah, training your eyes to see is really, really important. If you're going to get, if you're going to paint accurately, realistic looking subjects. And there are sort of hints of violet and blue in this background, all sorts. It gets more orange as we get up here. Be quite rough with the brush. That variation obviously, hopefully is going to, hopefully is going to add some interest. I might even use a palette knife towards the end just to add variety of the marks. The one thing that you can do to help you avoid that mistake of painting what you know, drawing what you know rather than what you can actually see, is if you're working from a photograph, turn the photograph upside down and just paint the shapes. And that will kind of train you to get used to just looking at shapes rather than thinking, right, I'm painting an apple now and an apple looks like this. Quite a textured background here. I will soften up a lot of this after. it's quite dark, it's much darker over this side here. And there are some kind of, there's some grain in the wood. I might kind of imply that a little bit. I think that's probably okay. And what I'm going to do is just soften some of that with the blending brush that I was using earlier, just so that it's not in your face, it's kind of not dominating. And then I might just get the knife and put some one or two kind of more definitive marks on like this. I'm not actually copying anything. I'm not even looking at the subject that much. I'm just trying to create a bit of variety in the background. You can go over the top of this and just be careful it doesn't become something really distracting. Right, now I'm going to mark in the shadow areas. So I'm back to that raw umber that I was using earlier. Use some of this in there as well. And I'm going to be using a flat ivory with a little bit of oil on the brush. And I think I might add a touch of black to that down here. Actually, while I'm doing this, there is an area slightly more lit down there. That's going to help to pick out that leaf. In fact, I've got all of this wrong. There is a light area all the way down there. That actually brings me on to my next point about, and I was going to talk a bit about when you see errors in your work. You know, and you're bound to, because as I said at the very start, this painting lark is a process of just correcting errors. So you are going to see errors. So I've just spotted that I've got the shadow slightly wrong down here. Now you can either just ignore it and hope the rest of the painting makes up for that, and it isn't noticeable, or you can fix it. And in my experience, the best approach is to try and fix it. Just don't ignore the mistakes. I mean, other people might not notice them, but you'll definitely notice them. And I found it the best policy is to fix them. So that needs blending. And then we've got this dark shadow up here. And then it merges down here. So yeah, don't turn a blind eye to the mistakes, correct them. You know, I mean, even to the extent where you know, you might have to wipe off the paint, but that it's better to do that and get it right than to leave them and every time you look at the painting you think, oh, I wish I'd sorted that mistake out. So I'm squinting now to look at the shape of these shadows. Like I say, I have changed it slightly. I've got the leaf tilted over slightly more than it actually is, just to add a bit of a more dynamic movement to that side of the painting. I want this flat. I don't want any ridges in this paint, because if there are ridges in it, the ridges will catch the light and it will then destroy the effect of it being shaded down here in shadow. I might need to darken that even more. Or actually make that slightly lighter. That is quite a bit lighter there. So now I'm looking at the shapes of the shadows, just trying to see a shape. I've just got to be wary. I've got all this texture here, and then now where I've put that light area in, I have nothing. So what I might do is just roughen up that area a little bit, just so it looks consistent with what's over here. Let's get some of that in there. Don't want it too perfectly neat. Okay, I think that's okay. Try and darken in the centre of that shadow, the kind of core part of the shadow. And same here. Now I'm just working the brush gently around the edge of that to blend it in, but not lose the value I've just added. Pull some of that paint this way a little bit. As it gets further away from the leaf, it gets softer. almost disappears completely. There's like almost no edge to that shadow. And then something similar on this one. That's actually looking better now. So I'm really squinting here. You can't see it obviously, but I'm really squinting to try and just look at shape of these shadows. That's okay, I think. We do some of this lighter value over here, and that will almost enhance the darkness of the shadow. Still keep it fairly textured. Let's get some of that lighter value up here. You know, I might come back and rework this, we'll see. When I get to something like finished. I haven't made my mind up yet. Touch of that yellow in there. Okay, don't want them hard edges there. Right, okay, so now I need to work on the apple. What I'm going to do is I've got a softer, even softer brush here just to get rid of any marks that are in this shadow. All of this I want to be soft. Right, let's try and work on the apple now. So just looking at my list again, things I haven't talked about. Expecting results too early, outlining a cartoon, no clear division between light and shadows, using the brush like a pencil, painting what you know, not what you see, turning a blind eye to errors, painting everything in high chroma, no greys, starting with thick paint, expecting progress to be quicker. And that works on two levels. So you might expect, in fact, you know what I'm going to do? I was just thinking about this now. You might expect to produce a painting very quickly. That could be one point. The other point is you might think that you know, your painting is going to improve over time quicker than it actually will. And what I might do is when I do this article, I might share some of the paintings I did like 10 years ago, just to show you where I was then and where I am now. Even sort of 4 or 5 years ago, I could show paintings that I did back then, and you can compare them to what I'm doing now. Make your own judgments, but I think I've made progress, but it's taken sort of 5 years, 10 years. And the point I'm making is it doesn't happen. It's slow. It's really slow. And you have to do dozens and dozens and dozens of pieces to actually see that improvement. You know, it's not going to happen in one painting. It's not going to happen in 10 paintings. You know, and it's a journey, isn't it? I mean, I'm not saying that I've arrived at all on this journey. I'm still constantly aiming to improve what I do. but I have realised now that it will take a long time. I started last Christmas, I started to try and paint smaller paintings and try to complete them in one sitting, and I'd never done that before, and the first few were dreadful. Well, quite a lot were dreadful. I'm gradually getting better at it, but it's taken a year, and I've been painting full time for probably 4 years before that. So you've got to be prepared for the long haul. Right, now I'm going to try and work on the apple. So I'm going to clean this up. Yeah, be prepared for the long haul, and don't get demoralized. Just try to enjoy the journey. At each stage, try to celebrate the little successes that you have along the way, and just enjoy it. One thing that I think is really bad for artists is social media, because what happens is you continually compare your own work with all the stuff that's out on Instagram, or B, you're so heavily influenced by all the work that you see on Instagram or wherever, that you're not developing your own approach. You end up copying, thinking, oh, you'll see something and go, that's really good, I'd like to be able to paint like that, and the next thing you're trying to do it, and then something else comes along, and you don't develop your own approach. And I'm guilty of that myself, and there's nothing wrong with sort of aspiring to the work that you like. That's obvious. You're going to try to aspire to the work that you like, but I'm saying don't try and copy other people. Let your own work develop. So, not sort of looking at other work, just focus on your own work. And that's the way to go. I mean, I have made the mistake in the past of trying to copy other people, but now I post my work on Instagram and I don't really look at what anybody else is doing, and hopefully I'll find my own way. Now, cleaned up, I'm just looking at this, and I think that shadow in there can go slightly more purple. Let's just have a look what that looks like. I need some oil on here. Now I'm going to have problems here because obviously this paint is, yeah, that's better there. Painting over the top of wet paint now, so I've got plenty of oil on here. Just to tint that shadow. I don't know how well that's showing up on the screen, probably not at all. And I'm using the brush very flat against the surface of the panel. I'm not digging into the paint, I'm trying to kind of glide over the surface with the brush so that it doesn't dig in. Right, I think I might stop rattling for a while and concentrate on what I'm doing. It's just gliding this over here. Take some of that violet up into that part of the shadow there. Now I've got this very soft sable brush, which will just help me to work that in gently. Don't want to get too light in value. And down in this bottom corner it's very dark down here. as I've said so often before, getting accurate colour in very dark and very light areas is really tricky, and especially like today over winter I'm having to work in under artificial light, and the lights are shining on the surface, and yeah, it's really tricky. Okay, now I'm going to go on to the apple itself, starting with the shadow side, and we've definitely got a violet on the right hand side here. There's a definite violet there where there's a bit of reflected light. Be careful I don't make it too light. I think there's actually a bruise on the apple. I think that's what it is. See, I've gone a little bit too light there. So what I need to do is just on that edge, make that even darker still. I'm going to use my stick now just to support my hand. And allow the paint to glide on if I can. So I'm making comparisons again, as always, between the apple and the shadow. And although there is a division between this side of the apple and that shadow behind, there is a division there. When I stare at that, I can clearly see a division. But then when I look at the entire image as a whole and I squint, all that merges into one. So that's the kind of effect I'm trying to get, where you can see the division just about, but then you don't lose the whole, the entire perception of the entire image. Right, so now I'm going to go and try to work on this shadow side of the apple. So I've got some crimson alizarin, some cadmium red and some transparent red oxide to give me a high chroma darkish red. And there on that bottom corner of the apple is getting some light reflected from the surface, so that's where I'm going to put that. I'm going to try and keep that core shadow that I can see. Might need to get some more burnt umber out. So as you can see, I'm using the brush to lay the paint down quite gently rather than digging into the layer below. I just want to lay it on gently. Now we're into the reds, the bright reds, so clean this off as best I can. The highest chroma area is here, it's really high, intense red, and that's that. I'm using cadmium red there. Let's just see now how that looks. That probably, yeah, might need a touch of the crimson mixing into it to start with. extend up here. And then it moves into pinks. So I'm going to use the Scarlet Lake now because that's more of an orange. And a touch of the white. Start to move towards these pinks that we get. Using the paint quite thick, almost neat. Keep looking at the subject, keep looking at your painting. Then we get to really nice pinks here. The pinky yellows. So I've got some cadmium yellow. Not looking at any of the patterning yet on the apple. I'll do that in a bit. That's a nice pink. Something like, probably even lighter than that actually. And that is Scarlet Lake and Titanium White. And I'm going to put some lemon yellow into that now. So it moves it towards the yellows. Right, what I'm going to do is go to that top corner. I'm getting lost in all these colours here. Like I do know that the brightest, lightest bit of yellow is up here, so that's where I'm going to go, and I'll work from there. And I'm going to change the brush so I'm not polluting anything. And now I'm kind of on a 1/4 inch. What size is this? This is number 3, ivory flat. I'm going to take some of my Michael Harding lemon yellow, which is a very pale lemon yellow. And I'm going to get some fresh white actually, so that white's polluted. So start with my really bright, and I'm going to use a big dollop of this. I'm not going to oil it down at all, put any oil in at all. And that highlight is kind of here. Try and do it on minimum amount of strokes. Now it fades in as we get round this corner. So we do move towards this orangey colour here. And then it kind of warms up a fraction, so I take a bit of cadmium and mix it in there. I don't want to go too dark. How's that looking? It's actually got some pink in it as well. pull down this side as light. Subtle variations on those colours that are in the apple. And I don't want a really defined edge there. So what I might do is just break that edge a little bit with some of the brush strokes. Like that. But I don't want that to be a particularly hard edge. I want this to be really hard here, that edge. This is just a process of refining and looking and adjusting and until you're happy. What I might do is add a touch of the Winsor and Newton lemon yellow just to make that appear more yellow. Now there is some patterning in this apple which I'm going to try and suggest, not deliberately, very deliberately paint, but just suggest. There's kind of these lines, these kind of patterning of texture on the surface of the peel, and there are some little tiny kind of dots on it. It's not an even surface basically. Right, now the dots that are on there and the highlight. Let's do the highlight first. So I'll clean the brush right off, get this highlight. It's not pure white. But if I put pure white on, what will happen is it will merge with the colours that are already on here. And then in the middle of it, I will have it slightly brighter. Something like that. Silly. emphasize the leaf a little bit more, I think. Still squinting, darker down here as well, but more of a brown, not quite as red. That extends up here. And then quite an intense red there. Right now, I'm kind of in two minds about what to do with these little speckles on the surface. I'm going to use a little brush to suggest them to start with, and then what I'll probably have to do is just subtly blend. So I'm looking for a tiny brush to start. There we go. And there, I like almost a greeny grey colour. Quite light. Yeah, they definitely got a green in there. How's that? That colour's way too light. And they'll just stand out like stars in the sky there. Well, I'll just add some ochre and some raw umber to that, just to take the value down, and use some oil. Right, let's see how they look now. So that's not too bad. Is there any kind of, when you're doing anything like this, like for example, seeds on a strawberry, seeds on a strawberry have got a pattern to the way they're distributed. Where I'm looking on this apple now to see if these little marks have got a pattern, but I don't think they have. And this, the thing is, doing this, it can very quickly just start to look contrived. It almost destroys what you're trying to do. So like I said, I'll see how it looks, and then I might end up taking these off. Just have a few of them on there. I'm not sure about them. I think I'll just take them. Okay, I'm going to leave them off because I don't think they had anything. Like I said earlier, keeping in mind all the time that I'm not, my main goal in this is not to necessarily produce a perfect copy of what I can see, although that will, probably will get to my main goal. That will help me to get to my main goal, but my main goal is to produce a painting that's nice to look at. And if that means leaving things out, then that's what I'll do. Okay, I don't like that brush mark there. That bottom part of the apple's going to disappear in a minute. As is this corner. Right, let me get that done. So I'm going to get some of the grey in there, and then I can start thinking about how I'm going to blend some of these areas. That's what I'm after, that edge to just disappear a touch. Get some more of that yellow in there. And then I want that edge to be, using a polluted brush doesn't help. When you're blending like this, you need plenty of paint on the surface, otherwise you can't move it. So I've got to get that in, and then I want the grey. And I'm going to put a bit of oil in it so as it will blend better. And then I'm going to use a very soft brush. It's clean. Just so that they work into each other a little bit. And the same thing's going to happen where the surface of the shelf is. Here, a bit lighter than that. Plenty of oil again. A soft brush. Okay, and then when I do the bottom of there, there'll be a hard edge along the bottom. Okay, now I get this leaf painted in, and then I'm going to really, in fact actually I might get that edge done first again, even though I've done it once, with that Michael Harding lemon yellow. And I want, like I say, I want a really quite a strong mark on there. So I've got really thick paint. It's going to catch the light. There. What's the shape like? I'm looking at the shape of this as much as anything else, just to make sure it doesn't look awkward or clumsy. It's okay. That's kind of my focal point of my painting. That area. That's why I'm using the thick paint to draw your eye to it. And then as we get further away, it just gets softer. Just be careful of that. There is a change in colour from the red to the yellow. It's quite a sharp change, but when you have things like that, sometimes it can look awkward and you think, well, what's going on there? Your mind doesn't know how to read it. is the tiniest touch. Find my brush. Tiniest touch of the greeny yellow there as well. So I'm actually going to get some green to mix into this. Just to give us a clue as to what's going on in this apple. I think that looks better. And now I'll paint the stalk in a moment, actually. It's all about, for me, the edges and the edges just, they're like magic. They really do make or break a painting, I think. And they're so good. Edges are so useful in helping you to steer where people are going to look. Just a touch darker there. Just to offset that little area of yellow. It's probably a bit too dark. Now we've got stalk and leaves and stuff going on there. Right, I'm going to leave that there. He says just about to add another bit. A big lump or something in the paint there. Very warm in here now. I'm going to have to turn the heating down. Okay, let's leave that now. I think that works. I'm just going to turn the heating down. So I'm going to leave it alone and then start fiddling and make a mess. There. Leave it alone. Okay, leaves. Right, I'm going to clean up. I'll stop the recording and clean up and then we'll do the leaves. Okay, let's get the leaves done. Right, with the leaves, I think I'm going to start with the darkest greens and work towards the lights. But mind you, I'm going to mix up both. I'm going to mix up the darks and the lights. Start with some of this cadmium. Touch of lemon yellow in there. some red in it just to take out some of the chroma. Let's see. That's not too bad actually for the light areas. Possibly have a touch more blue in it. Fractionally. It's hard to judge. I think the light areas, that's going to be okay. There's some very light areas that have got quite a bit more blue in them. Only one or two areas that are really catching the light. And then the darks, I'll start with black, get some of that into it. Then there's ultramarine blue, a bit of iridium. That might be too cool. I'll put some raw umber in it, see how we get on. I can go almost black. Okay, start with the lights. Oil again. Okay, now I don't want to lose that dark edge. And I'm just wondering how much of this needs actually, how much do I need to tell the viewer, if that makes sense? How much will I need to put in so that they can read this image? There's a few clues that these are leaves, and it's things like the veins. So there's a vein I put in earlier down here. I'm using a flat brush and I'm trying to get the paint right on the edge. Kind of, if you can see what I'm doing, just pushing the brush. Is that showing up on the camera? Ah, there. Push the brush and pick up a little band of paint, and then use the flat edge of the brush to just deposit that down. Hopefully that's enough information to allow you to read this as a leaf. I kind of got the opposite effect up here. Hopefully that thick lump of paint is going to help you to read that as a leaf. And then I just try to gradually fade that into that area there. This corner's quite dark. All this is quite dark, so I'm going to go in with the darker colours now. Down here we have a very, how's my stomach rumbling? Very dark shadow. That's virtually black in there. And then the edges of these leaves are quite broken. And then we go towards this lighter green here at this side. Now, that is slightly lighter than the background, so I'm making that comparison only very slightly. remember what I said, these aren't actually off an apple tree, these leaves. So I don't want to be too religious about copying them exactly, because there'll be some expert out there who spots it. Okay, now we've got the curled over bit, which is a grey. Just let me put that very dark bit at the top again. So get the flat of the brush. I don't normally do any blending yet, but just want to get that. Okay, I'll do the blending after. Right, now let's get the light areas done. So that's a grey. So I'm using lots of raw umber. Some of this green, not much of it. Some yellow ochre. And plenty of white. There we go, we've got a very warm grey. So the lightest there is down this front edge. Make it even lighter than that, I think. I'd say a bit of texture helps. A cleaner brush. Do with some texture here, just to tell us that's curling over. Now let's go in with a slightly darker version of that. Catching the light a little bit. Right now this edge here is catching light. I'm trying now to use the texture of the paint just to create the sense of this being curled and quite sort of wrinkly. time is it? My daughter's about to go into an exam. She's been worrying herself crazy about this exam. Hope she's okay. She said she didn't sleep at all last night. She's doing a degree in zoology, and it's very academically heavy. She spent all of Christmas revising. Had exams before Christmas, and she's got exams straight after Christmas. So Christmas for her was just work. Try and lighten and increase the chroma of that shadow as we go around that corner. Now the bottom edge of this is virtually going to disappear because it's the same value as the background. Make it slightly, ever so slightly lighter. And I will paint them veins that are on it, I think. I'll come back to them after. There's a dark shadow in there. And then it's very high chroma area here. Now we've got the same kind of curling over effect at the top there. I don't think that's, looking at it now, I don't think that's quite dark enough, that top edge. That's better. I'll have to paint down there, I think, afterwards. The top part. So, as I said, that's the shadow side. And then we go into a light green. They're not really convincing as leaves, are they? I think it's just the shape of them that they're actually not convincing as leaves. So what can I do to make that more realistic? I think get some thick paint on here maybe. It's a bit better, I think. Just having something that's a bit more defined. Same on that edge there, I think. And the one at the back. Come on. Apple tree leaves do have those kind of little spikes on them, I think. From what I can remember from last time I painted apple tree leaves. I think that curled over edge will help. Right, I think I'm going to do a bit of blending to help soften them and make them a bit more interesting. One thing I do need to do first though is get some grey purpley colour down here. Let's have a look at what that looks like. I'm just trying to unify these edges a little bit more. Sorry, unify the background, I should say. So I've fiddled around with edges and it's kind of disrupted the background a little bit. Let's leave that there. I'm actually wondering if I can go even darker on that shadow now down there, but I think that's just because the light outside's changing. Right, I'm going to now try to soften specific edges on the leaves. So here, for example, that can all just disappear there because they are the same value. This can disappear here. That isn't super important. I don't want to lose that little corner quite like that. I haven't done this one, have I? Right, the darks. Just notice something. That's better. Right, here we go. This is for this edge on this apple. shadow a bit darker. Oh. Edge still bugging me. Okay, let me just work on just the bottom of there. Still not. I'm never 100% sure whether I've pulled it off or not. Ever. It's usually a few days later I'll look at them and think, oh, actually that's not too bad. Sometimes. Sometimes I think, oh, that's dreadful. I'll tell you what I'm going to do here. I'm actually going to get a set square and just to make sure I don't get this in the wrong place. The light's actually in the way. I'm trying to do this without it touching the painting. Just as a suggestion of a line on this side. Then I'll make it a bit heavier on the other side. There's my brush gone. Just need to, oh, there is a shadow there. think I'm going to work over the background a bit more. As I was saying earlier on, I wasn't quite sure how it was going to work. I think some areas need to be a bit lighter. I like it. I like the texture, but I think some areas need to be lighter. Well, that's miles off, miles off. I'm hunting around for space here. I probably need to do this properly. There's a hint of pink in this yellow. There. Maybe even more white. My stomach's going crazy. Silly boy. Okay. Where's my really soft blending brush now? Where is it? Come on. I've got a fabulous brush somewhere for this job, this next job. I don't know where it's gone. Never mind. Let's use this one. Let's go into the background now, a little bit lighter. This is where I start using dozens of brushes. It's a bit too much. Too bad. I literally am just almost being creative where I put, I'm trying to look at where do I think it needs it to be lighter, where do we need some patches of colour. I want this background to be sort of variegated. I might use them, go back with the knife again now. Am I happy with that? There's something down here I'm not happy with. Can't quite figure out what it is. Where's that brush? I think I might. Just wondering whether to make more of that reflected light on that corner. I'm going to have to do it carefully. See what happens. There's even more than that. That's a bit better. I think I'm going to leave it. I'm running the risk of getting fussy. Oh, see? I'm going to leave it there, I think. I think we've done as much as we can do. Right. I might just... I keep saying I'm going to leave it and then do something else. I might just add, if I can find the right brush, I'll do it with this one. Add a bit more pink. Around this. And then right in the middle, and then put the signature this side. I do it put this side. I might put it this side.
Right, realised I haven't added the stalk yet, which is a fairly important part of this painting, given that it holds everything together. Try my best not to get it too fussy. Now, as I said, the leaves are not from an apple tree, so that means that the stalk is not from an apple tree either. So I've just got to be wary of that. And I know that from experience that apple tree stalks are kind of a greyy, they have kind of knobbly grey bits on them. Oh, sorry. There. Well, I wonder how my little daughter's doing. Oh, she's not so little. I think I may